So let's dive in. I'm sure that you are probably done talking about the state of the world. So I want to get into something I think would be useful to people and certainly to me. You and I talk a lot about DNA, especially when it comes to athletics. And I want to get your thoughts on whether or not you feel that an entrepreneur is just wired to create. Do you sense that some entrepreneurs are just wired to be entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, there's a DNA for everyone. So it depends upon the person. It isn't really just because someone's labeled an entrepreneur. It really depends upon the DNA of the individual, regardless of his title.
Mm-hmm. So when I hear a lot of people talk about, hey, it's an extremely amazing time to use the state of the world to create and to innovate and so forth and so on. Here, a lot of people talk about ideas. Very few of these things come to fruition. Do you feel like it's because most of the people out there lack that sincerity to follow through on their ideas?
I think I think the question really only pertains to the ones who, for whatever reason, have the compulsion to create. As opposed to, why it is that the others don't. I mean, those who don't are not going to, and those who do can't help but to. So it is what it is.
I know that you personally don't believe in a process or a technique, but I'm going to ask this question anyway. Spent several hours today talking to a group of really talented people, business people. And one of the things that they were talking, the phrase that I heard probably 50 times during the hour and a half of conversation was protect the process, protect the process. That the way we get out of this thing is to protect the process. The way that we innovate is to protect the process. You don't believe in a process.
Well, I don't believe in anything because it's not about belief. Human beings like to hang on to terms and ideas and concepts, and they turn those into gods, and they begin worshiping at the feet of a concept. And so, the truth is whatever it is, right? It isn't about plucking one idea out and then worshiping at that altar. And so that's kind of what everyone does. I mean, vulnerability and process and this and that, and they idolize the term. And it's never the term. It's never the word. It's never the concept. Because if you look at things through that lens, you'll become very myopic. You won't see the whole picture. So you don't. If you're beholden to ideas and concepts, then you don't really have the eyes to see the entire truth.
Well, they use it a lot because of athletes, right? That they sense that. Hey,
well, you have to understand something. Intelligence is seeing the pattern behind things. And if you look at the themes and you look at the patterns of human beings, what they do is, they try to get people to do X because they don't like Y. And when they say X, they just basically go to the extreme of the X. Everything is a reaction to. So the only reason that they mention process is because people started looking at results and then they got nervous about the result. So then they created focus on the process as a direct knee-jerk reaction to result. So they just replaced result with process, and it's all just a shell game. It isn't for sincere, serious individuals. So I don't want you worrying about the result. So I'm going to have you worry about the process as if that's the king now. It isn't process or result. I mean, it's about finding out where you want to go. It's not about worshiping words. And that's where everyone is, all these, like I said, be courageous and be vulnerable and be prideful. This is all just nonsense, idiot talk. It's not reality. It's just turning the English language into a bunch of demigods to follow.
What do you think about when you hear that? Because obviously, I mean, we have probably heard more about resilience and courage and vulnerability over the last month and a half than, in a long time, but they are buzzwords in business. Do you just not think about that?
Well, I think, there's no good or bad, wrong or right. There's just the truth. And the truth is that very, 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 very few human beings on this planet are looking for the truth, and it isn't a bad thing or a good thing. And when a person is not looking for the truth, then all of these side effects and circumstances, however they manifest themselves, such as worshiping words and ideas and concepts, and all these things, those are the natural result of not seeking the truth. And there, like I said, it must be critically understood that it isn't about the fact that you should seek the truth. That's just the way it is.
And the truth typically lives outside of your mind, right? Like you never really see.
Well. No, I don't know. I think that's sort of a mind-generated statement, and that's kind of mind saying don't bother because it's so far outside your mind that you're never going to get to it. So because of that, let's just stick with the status quo. And so I can't stress and emphasize enough. I mean, I can't scream from the rooftops enough that it isn't about seeking the truth. It's just about who you are. And if that's your DNA, that's what you're going to do. And if it's not, there's no reason in having a conversation. There's really not. I mean, because there's no point in talking to that type of individual, at least not for me. That's not what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in explaining to someone why they don't seek the truth, and in any clever shape or form suggesting that they should.
But you inspire some of us to at least to start to think like that.
Well, okay, fine. But let's just be honest, Mo, right? Let's just be frankly honest, if we may. If I did inspire that, then I wouldn't get these kind of questions, right? If I really inspired you, let's say that I inspired you, and I don't mean to, and I'm not saying that I'm worthy of inspiring anyone, but let's just say by some accident that I did, then I don't think that these would be the type of questions that would naturally blossom inside of you. Right. Most importantly, and like I said, we're just having a really, there's no reason having a podcast about crap like all the rest of them. All right. I mean, we're going to talk honestly now.
I
right?
love it.
So okay. So there really is, and it isn't about me condemning you or anything. I'm just speaking openly here. It's if you really wanted the truth, and if that really was what you were inspired to do, then I think it would be all about you. I think that your questions would arise in a way that would help you get to the truth. And the idea of helping, quote, society or the listeners or the audience or the world, while they may be on the other line listening, so to speak, that wouldn't be where your allegiance is. Because the allegiance is never to the other. The allegiance is never to the world. Those are just made up, manufactured ideas in the form of ego. It really is, if it's about the person himself. If that person is truly, genuinely inspired, just because they are, then the quality of the question that they ask will reflect that.
Well, I have to tell you that I feel like I have grown infinitely from the standpoint of this whole notion of helping people, and you kind of have kind of imprinted it in my mind to just be very conscious of that. So as I think about it, it's hard for me to let go of what is it that we can have conversations around, certainly that could help me, but help others. At the same time, I understand that at some point, I personally have to say, you know what, here's some things that I need to stop doing in order to get to where I need to.
I don't know. I kind of perhaps would say that it isn't about you stopping anything. I think that the stopping happens by itself. And I think all things are an offshoot of realization and understanding. And so it isn't that you have to stop anything, because that would be false. And that would just be a reaction to something else. So it really is the understanding that if for whatever reason someone is really desirous of helping someone else, and let's say that for whatever reason that desire to really genuinely and organically help other people was really deep and sincere in a human being, then the only way to really help anyone else is to understand yourself.
I get it.
Because everyone is in the same boat. Every human being, rich, poor, any country that they live in, any village, all human beings suffer from the same plight. All human beings go through the same types of assaults from the mind in the form of anxiety and fear and concern and anger and emotional upheaval and uncertainty and all of these things. And so no one's really unique in that. Everyone has to go through those storms. And so that being the case, then it really is about having the genuineness to go through that storm for yourself. And if someone is going to learn and become inspired or whatever it may be, then that will come from not you trying to help them, but you essentially finding that within yourself.
When do you get a gauge of that level of sincerity or seriousness within yourself?
What do you mean?
There's a part of you that feels like I have an incredible amount of seriousness or sincerity, and I'm trying to kind of think within the context of how you think, to truly, for my own well-being, try to understand my own truth. A lot of times I'm conflicted between, is that narrative going on in my head, or is that sincerity in the way that you look at it?
Yes. So perhaps the safest response is to say that it's always a narrative, and if it's sincerity, it's insincerity in the willingness to understand that it's all a narrative, as opposed to trying to dissect out the pieces that are true versus false. I think understanding that it's all false, and the only sincerity is the thing that compels you to do what you do, because whatever action that you take, that is your natural desire. What you do is a reflection of what you really feel inside. And so that is a much better gauge than sort of intellectual conversations with yourself about whether something is sincere or not.
And is that, two things I want to bring up here. One of the things that you wrote not too long ago that really got me thinking about that was when you talked about the difference between somebody who's a superstar at what they do and one who struggles. And it's the person who is a superstar enjoys being a superstar, and the other person enjoys the struggle. And I think you made a comment that if there's only one person in the Twitter universe that understands that, is that what we're talking about here?
Well, I was saying that there might be only one person in the Twitter universe who understands the messages that come onto my Twitter account. I wasn't talking specifically about that statement. The messages that appear on the Twitter account really are, a lot of them are cryptic, and a lot of them are.
They are.
They can be difficult to understand, but everything has to be stated in its raw form, and whoever's sort of ready to hear it is, and who's not is not. And so it isn't about dumbing things down for the public and the masses. I have no interest in that. That's, society is saturated with, catering to the masses. And so for me, it isn't, those messages aren't put out to change anyone or to, make someone, follow my way of doing things or to teach anyone. They just are. And because they're not dumbed down, then it really requires a reach on the part of the individual to want to understand them. And not that they should, but if for whatever crazy reason they're compelled to, then so be it. So it isn't about bending down and giving to the poor, so to speak. It is, the poor man is most helped when he's inspired. He is most helped when he is compelled to get up onto his own 2 feet, because that will last him for the rest of his life. Handouts don't. So, and once again, I must be clear. I'm not doing this because I think this is better for humanity. I'm not doing this because I think this is good for you to be able to reach, as opposed to me just to give it to you. I'm not doing it for you. It just sort of comes and it appears on the page.
And that's what I appreciate so much about it. But this statement really did get me thinking, the difference between a superstar athlete and one who struggles throughout his career. is the one who enjoys being a superstar and the other enjoys the struggle. So is that telling me that the overwhelming majority of the world just loves to live in misery?
Well, there is great comfort in misery, and there's nothing wrong with living in misery. There's no judgment.
Where is the comfort in misery?
Well, familiarity. Whatever someone is most accustomed to, that's the home that a human being has built. And so in that home, he or she knows where the furniture is. He or she knows that even if the lights are turned off, he or she knows which hall to walk down, and then where exactly the bedroom is, and where the library is, and where the bathroom is, without even having to see. Now, if you place that person into a brand new house in a new city, there's great discomfort there. And by the way, I must stop once again, and I have all these disclaimers because I know where people's minds go because they're conditioned by society. It isn't good to feel discomfort. It isn't good for you that you should feel discomfort.
And that you should
get out. Yeah, that's all crap. There's no, once again, see, I can't say two words without a bumper sticker showing up and floating across the TV screen. You know what I mean? So there's no should. There's no you should be uncomfortable. No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't do anything. It isn't about doing this or that. But that's the reason why you become comfortable according to what you're accustomed to, and that's kind of the idea from the Shawshank Redemption, right, where the individual was in prison for 50 years and then didn't want to get let out because there was this big new world that the person had no idea how to live in, and that's that was so-called institutionalized, and that's very emblematic of human beings.
It's funny that you say that. I literally just rewatched that movie over the weekend. So do you think that maybe the perhaps the biggest reason that gets in the way of us choosing to change is that level of familiarity is acceptable to us?
It is, but there's a tinge in your voice which says that you shouldn't be. It's almost like everything that you say is a lesson, and like, so what if
right,
so I say yes, that's correct. I mean, your implication is written on the wall, which says thou shall not be comfortable, and thou shall, you know what I mean? It's so implicit in what you're saying, and that's just the cultural conditioning of society. It isn't about helping the audience. Whoever wants to get helped, believe me, they will reach the way they have to reach. They will do what they have to do. But the more that you have to bend down and make up for the lack of sincerity by the bending of your posture, it's a waste of time. And quite frankly, not only is it a waste of time, even if it worked, it's of no joy to me to do that. It's boring. I have no interest in that.
So let me ask you then, between the whole, I know your perspective on self-improvement, right, versus arrival. So what I'm interested in now, as I hear you say that, is what do you call everything in between where you are right now and that arrival destination where you're getting closer to the truth? Is that not progress? Is that not, like, what do you call that?
Yeah, so these are very, very difficult conversations because the language that we're speaking, may be English, but it's a whole different plane of conversation. It's kind of like when they say that God does not get sad, or basically the idea of sadness is in the human framework. Why would you even apply sadness to God? And the only reason that you would is because the only way that a human being can view things is through his own framework, right? Mm-hmm. So God, if he exists, he might say, well, what is sadness? I've never heard of that before, right? What do you mean by that? And so when you say, what do you call that? I mean, the name that I give you, you're going to apply it in the world of the culture, and it's not going to have any meaning.
How do you think of that, the in-between?
So there is no in-between. There's only the sincerity of the path that you are on. So when someone is genuinely on the path of truth, he's on the path of truth from the very first step. When the person's on a path to prescription, he's on prescription from the very first step, and those paths do not meet. So it's the nature of the path. It isn't the progress bar. And the reason that you have progress bars is because no one gets anywhere. And the reason that no one gets anywhere is because prescriptions don't get you anywhere. And that doesn't mean that you should not follow prescriptions. They just don't. And I implore that no one take that to heart and say, well, I'm not going to follow prescriptions anymore. That will be a waste of time. It's about if you have the sincerity or the desire or the longing or the interest or the attraction to the idea of looking into prescriptions and how they sabotage human beings, and they simply have absolutely no possibility of getting anyone anywhere that is consistent or permanent, then you will. If you don't, then you don't. But it isn't about me to say that you shouldn't follow prescriptions, because that itself would be a prescription.
Of course. I mean, I get that part of it. For you personally, do you look at it as a path towards your own truth, or do you look at it, do you get up every day and you just know intellectually, or however you want to think about it, that's your singular mission in life, and whatever comes through you that day is leading you towards that?
So imagine a person who's smitten by the stock market, right? Right. So imagine this person who just lives, eats, and breathes the stock market. Now, the moment that he gets up, he starts checking, his portfolio, starts looking at the stocks, starts looking at the market, starts looking at the Dow, starts looking at all these things. And then on the TV, he has the ticker going across the screen, right? And he's got the Wall Street Journal, and he's got all the stuff. So everything in his life. You can never, so for a person who's obsessed with the stock market, and by the way, please, there's no good or bad here. I'm just making an example. A person who's obsessed.
That's not healthy.
Yeah. Well, what do you mean?
Just being obsessed with the stock market is very detrimental to your health.
Nothing is detrimental to anything. If you're obsessed with self-improvement, that isn't healthy either. They're all dead ends, so it doesn't really matter. So imagine this guy. If you take a cross section of any point of his day, there is never a time that he isn't either looking or thinking about the stock market. And so that is his path. That wasn't even consciously chosen. It chose him.
Sure.
So it's the same thing with the truth. So it isn't a person who is obsessed with the truth. He never leaves that. So even if he goes to buy a gallon of milk, he's thinking about truth. And that's why it is really counterproductive and really of no useful of no value for someone to say, well, how often do you think about truth, and do you how many times a day do you think about it? The person who's obsessed with truth, he never leaves it. He never leaves it. And that's why all these part-time spirituality things, I'm going to go meditate for an hour or 20 minutes, and then I'm going to go see this over here. Those things, once again, they're not wrong. They're not wrong. You're not killing anybody. They're not wrong, right? Well, even killing someone's not wrong, but that's another podcast. But they're not, wrong. It's just that's prescriptive, and even being prescriptive is not wrong. It's just that won't get you anywhere, and even that's not wrong. It's just if someone really wants to get there, for that rare person who really wants to get there and to arrive and has gotten sidetracked by the misinformation that prescription is the way to get there, then that person may benefit from knowing and experimenting with the idea that prescription will not get him there. Because quite frankly, for the most people, they don't really care that prescription won't get them there because they're not really looking to get anywhere, right? They enjoy, as you said, the process. They enjoy the practicing, right? They enjoy this is part of my day, and I go exercise over here, and I go see the meditation instructor over here, and I get my yoga mat over here, and there's nothing wrong. I'm not belittling them. That's just what they do. So they're not interested in an arrival. So for them, it really is of no consequence to know that prescription is not the way, because they actually seek prescription. That's what they actually want. So this is for the one who really wants to arrive, but has gotten sidetracked.
And do you get a sense of that arrival when the things that used to arise in your mind don't arise anymore? Do you know that?
Yes.
Is that kind of how what you start to feel?
Yes. Yeah, something within you begins to transform, and it happens all by itself. And it's all about exposure. If you are only exposed to one thing meaning one way, which is the prescription way, that's all you will know. That's you. What else would there be? And that's why it is such an antithetical concept for most. It's a tectonic shift concept that it's almost insane. What do you mean there is no how? Because when someone, it's all that they've known for 40, 50, 60, 80 years is the how. And there's been no contrary view, right? No opposing view to that there is, or even an alternative, then naturally that's the only thing they're going to know.
Kapil, does the writing that you do every day help you with your mind?
The writing just comes from this ethereal place that I can't explain, and it really is about the immersion.
Everybody who reads it thinks it's poetic.
Well, the poetic, if it happens to be poetic, that some deem it poetic, that perhaps is an intersection of the sort of the speaking in tongues, unself-conscious, free-flowing stream of internal feeling that's sort of being channeled from somewhere else, intersected with some small facility of talent for the act of writing. And so that may be, where some words might come from, or a sentence that, one person may perhaps think is nicely phrased. I think it's the intersection of those two things.
And are you writing for yourself, or are you writing to share with others?
Yeah, it's a good question. It really, for me, is about the immersion. And if I write to teach, if I write to instruct, if I write to write to help, if I write for another, it really isn't. It really isn't an out of body experience. It becomes more like work, and I have no interest in working. So it isn't. I could say. I suppose you could say in some ways it's for myself, but it's even beyond that. I would say it's from beyond myself somewhere. It just comes. So it isn't. Well, read this and then go implement this. And I know that's what the world is used to, but that's not what this is. It just comes from somewhere. So it really isn't a for something or someone. You know what I mean?
So it's definitely not for an audience, and you certainly, I assume you're at a point where approval, disapproval, you're completely agnostic to that.
Yeah, and I hate to even say that because I don't want to
give a shit.
Yeah, I mean the thing is though, it's true, but I don't want to take ownership of that to imply like look where I've arrived, like I don't care what anyone thinks, I will say very, very softly and almost apologetically that I don't really care if someone likes it or not, or if they agree with it or not. In fact, I don't like agreement. It doesn't interest me. And all these things sound so out of the mainstream, right? I get a lot of emails saying, thank you, I guess, changed my life. And it wasn't me, it was the words. And if there was some communion between you and the words, right? It was that communion which helped you in some way. But so I don't want to say that, I don't care whether you like it or not, as if I'm taking ownership of some characteristic that I've successfully achieved. It just happens to be that way, that I'm not really interested in if someone likes it or not. Yes, but I say it very softly, not so that I won't be offensive. I say it softly because I don't want to have any ownership of any characteristic that I can sort of plant a flag and say, this is what I've achieved. I've not to be humble, I just have no interest in that.
I know that, and I appreciate that. And certainly like the comments that you get when people say that you changed or impact, however you want to take a look at it, of people's lives, it certainly happens. And I'm always saying that to you. But isn't that also where kind of freedom lies, is when you have that sense of independence from what people think, and an obvious.
There's absolutely enormous. That's one of the the greatest milestones of freedom that there is to be completely independent of the opinion of others. And even more critically, the next level is to be completely independent of the opinions of yourself.
Do you analyze at all the relationship that you have with yourself? I know it's an incredible immersion and obsession with doing what you're doing, but do you feel like you have a peaceful relationship with yourself?
I'm sort of so deep into the fibers of it that I don't really take a step back to say where it is, so that I can put a plaque on it. You know what I mean? So like there's such a natural obsession. It's not good or bad. There just is. There's such a natural obsession for the arrival at truth in all things that I never like stop and then take step back 10 feet and say, what is the relationship? What would we call this peace? What would we call this? Not really interested. I mean, nothing is ever that clean, right? I mean, even if you look at a river, I mean, the purest river, you'll have some places where it's murky, and then you'll have some places where it's crystal clear, and the murky part isn't trying to become clear. There just happens to be maybe some seaweed in that area, or a collection of rocks, or a little bit of sediment, which makes it look murky. So nothing is ever linear, and nothing is ever clean. It's everything is an immersive. That which is genuine is an immersive process, and there really is no judgment as to whether it's this or that.
You, to me, are in constant examination mode. And as I was sharing with you on this Zoom call this morning with a couple of these leaders, I could just sense in the tone of their language and in the verbiage and just what I see on camera is that they're not actually struggling with their companies, they're struggling with themselves. And that's what triggered me asking you that question. It's very visible when you see somebody who appears to have a really challenging relationship with themselves.
No, there are no business problems. There are no sports problems. There are only human problems.
All conflict is self-conflict.
That's right.
Right. That's something that's probably been etched in my mind for a while. A friend wanted me to ask you a question about friendship. How do you look at friendship, and how valuable is it to you?
It's a good question. Like I'm not any standard, right, by which to judge. So it's not about following anything that how I view things. Everyone has their own life, and what I will say is this. And before even saying it, it's critical not to take it to heart, because if you follow it and prescriptionize it, it's useless to you. If it connects with you on a non-intellectual level, then so be it. Anything that you attach to in this life, you'll pay a price. And whether it's a thing or whether it's a person. And you just can't have a conversation with someone who responds to that by saying, then what should I do? Should I not have any friends? Should I not? The answer to that is just silence. You can't respond to that, because that isn't a sincere question. It isn't about, if that statement struck something in you, then it did. If it didn't, then obviously it didn't, if it led to that kind of question. So the truth is that any form of attachment, dependency, or reliance in any way upon any human being, I don't care if it's your children or your wife, it doesn't matter. I don't care if it's your parents. I mean, parents will go out of their way. Parents will give their lives for their children. Okay, but you have to understand that a human is a human first, and that isn't to be compassionate. That's just a fact. A human is a human before he is a father, a mother, a brother, a sister, a son, whatever he may be. He is a human first. And if you view humans as humans, and you understand that fundamentally a human will always be a human first before he will be any role that he or she plays, then you will understand that to attach yourselves to that human is to attach yourself based upon the role that you have created. And to attach yourself based upon the role that you have created, you are going to invite loads of misery, because that is a square peg in a round hole. you are viewing the human through the role, child, parent, sister, whatever it is. But that isn't the allegiance of the human. The allegiance of a human is to his humanness, to his freedom, much more than it is to his role. And I'm not saying that they won't be allegiance to the role, but that won't come first. That primally, on a primal basis, that will not come first. And that isn't good or bad. That isn't right or wrong.
That makes so much sense to me. If you're sitting around with your boys having a conversation about friendships or relationships, do you ever inject your own perspective, or do you?
Yeah, that's a dangerous question. So it's, what are you going to get if you talk to me, right? I mean, I'm going to tell you what it is, and you're probably not going to be ready to hear it. And that isn't a hierarchical thing. It's going to be crazy talk, right? So yeah, I've told them both that, you don't really have any friends. There's, at the end of the day, the person that you can rely upon most is yourself, and we'll be here to help you. But at the end of the day, especially as an adolescent, friendship is a disaster because the environment, the culture, and the generation in which we live in now is the single most degraded generation ever to walk the face of the earth.
Yeah, for sure.
And so if everyone, perfect segue, right? If everyone's infected, right, by mass media and the language being used and the pop culture and the music, which curses every other word, and the movies that are, put out from Hollywood that are so bad that they're not even worth airtime, and even the podcasts that are put out, they're all just prescriptionized self-help jargon, just garbage. I'm sorry, it just is, man. And the books that are published on the bestseller list. So when you live in a world in which 360, everything around you is of harmful, low quality, then anything or person that you pluck out of that place is likely to be saturated with these infections. So unless you happen to pluck that 1 in a million individual who renounces all of these things, you're not going to pluck Gandhi out of you're just not, all right? So naturally, you have to look at the source. If you go to a polluted pond, you're going to get polluted fish. So it isn't so much about people, it's about the environment, it's about the culture. If you happen to so-called befriend a person who lives in a remote village in Africa or in India or somewhere, you can't say for sure, but because that source is more pure and less touched by the hand of modernity, then I would say there perhaps is certainly a higher likelihood that individual is someone who will be a good influence upon you. But societal urbanites of the modern culture, there's a 1 in 100 million chance that you're going to befriend or surround yourself with those who are going to bring you to higher heights. In fact, they're going to bring you to lower lows. And since you become your environment, regardless of your intentions or your efforts, then it naturally is logical that so-called friendship and relations are a non-starter, and they're very harmful.
Does it surprise you that people, despite the fact that your purpose is not to help others, gravitate to every word you say?
I'm not sure how many gravitate. I'm not sure. I would certainly say that those people who are fed up with the status quo and the traditional norms and cultural society certainly might find a home in this sort of approach and in these words. But I would say that for the most, it's too far outside the mainstream to really perhaps catch their interest in any significant way. I mean, and once again, what I just said has no significance whatsoever, because I have no idea how people feel. I mean, sure, I'll I get the emails and I get the, but that's, once again, I mean, there's
they're not flattering to you.
The world, no, I mean,
and I say it with all due respect, because
I mean, you've asked me before. You've asked me, doesn't that make you feel good, and isn't that awesome? And I don't know. I mean, I would say it's good for them. It isn't good or bad for me. It's good for them. It's helpful for them if they happen to connect with something and it sparked something in them and it changed, their way of living or existence, whatever it may be. That's great for them. But like, I don't go on the lookout for those kind of emails and responses on Twitter and like that's and take like all this pride from it. And once again, I'm not saying that's like I'm so evolved that I can only raise my hands. I can only raise my hands and say, listen, the interest isn't really there. Like it doesn't, you know what I mean? That's not why I did it. So I don't take pride from that. They happened to get something from the words. It was a communion between the words and them. And so be it. I mean, what else can I say? I don't want to take ownership of anything as if I'm going to stand tall and say, yes, that does not affect me. And I don't want to own that. I'm just describing the way that I feel.
All right, let me ask you two more other quick things. Again, a couple kind of emerged today. And this is, again, I really want your honest opinion on that. A lot of people were talking about, this is a really great time to get in, to find your flow. This is a really great time to train your mind to get in the zone and so forth.
Well, but hang on, but stop right there. This is a really great time to do all the, as opposed to what? As opposed to what time?
As opposed to being comfortable with normality, which is get up and go to work and, life.
Well, it doesn't matter if this thing happens to spark something in you which lasts a lifetime, fine. But it's very likely that even if your mind drifted towards this is a very good time to do X, once the time changes, you'll revert back.
Sure.
So it's back to like, New Year resolution type things.
What does that flow or in the zone mean to you personally? Is that? It's
a state of no mind.
And is that something that you find yourself there throughout the day? Or can you call that on demand if you find your mind cluttered?
Yes, I can, but I ask for 1,000 apologies for saying that, because I just do. It's very apologetic for me to say that. I'm just answering your question directly, because that is not that isn't an accomplishment that I'm proud of. It's just I kind of just found my way there because I had to find the way there. It was that obsessive to me. It was so that deep of a desire to me, and therefore I did. And that applies to any human being. Whatever someone's really obsessed by, they'll get there, and they'll find it because there's no choice for them. And so so I say it apologetically because it's not some kind of feather in the cap that I want to walk around with. I just don't. But I just answer your question directly.
Well, I appreciate it. So let me end with this. In terms of the deep examination that you're constantly doing on yourself, are you primarily studying all the mistakes that you've made and trying to understand why they happened and what's causing them?
Oh, no, I already know where all the mistakes happened.
So what are you doing then during that? If mistake X happened, are you just digging deeper into the layer of why they happened?
No, it's just about a genuine desire to understand the whole picture. It's about a genuine and obsessive desire and a longing to arrive at the truth about all things. So mistakes are the natural result of lack of understanding. And a lack of understanding is, to a large and significant degree, the natural result of wanting to seek prescriptions instead of understanding. So wherever a person errs, that is, a person functions according to his level of understanding.
And it's all an inside game.
Meaning what?
It's all in your head.
But that has many connotations. Words are dangerous. What you just said is going to be taken the cultural way, and therefore it's yes, it is all internal. It is not. In other words, it's not that you did this and you should have done that.
Right.
That isn't the mistake. The mistake is to believe that there is a that. And once again, where are you going to go with that, right? This is so ridiculously off the wall that, we're on the other side of the Himalayas over here, and we're talking to, we're talking on this side of the Himalayas at the foothills, right? So what are you going to do with that, right? To say there is no this or that. If you're gonna put a gun to someone's head and say you must say what wrong is, okay, well, wrong is this is wrong and that is wrong. The idea that you believe that there's a right way is wrong. It's not truth. So the understanding and the arrival at that understanding that it isn't about doing this or that, that is the understanding that one does not have when they make error upon error. It isn't because lack of intelligence or anything else. It isn't because behavior modification and psychotherapy. And don't get me angry because I don't want to go down that road. All this self-help stuff. It just isn't there. It is about a fundamental lack of understanding as a result of a fundamental lack of the desire to understand.
I have to ask you this. Do you see generationally that the world evolves out of this situation that we're dealing with, better off, worse off, the same?
Well, if it's better off, it's going to revert. So it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it is this virus situation is just one more manifestation of just how far humans have drifted from their own nature. So this is just the detail. So what's different about war, right? There's wars all around the world.
Yeah.
So if you look at every part of human action all around the world, you will see that the degradation of human beings is manifest in every possible way. This is just another detail. This is just another exhibit A. And there's going to be more of this. So this is just happens to be under the category of, biological infection. There's 100 categories and they're all degraded. It's just that we haven't, so no one is, everyone's sort of desensitized to war because it's been going on for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the virus thing is sort of new to this scale, especially, and therefore it's at the forefront because this category hasn't really been, at least in modern times, seen to this degree. And so these are all just categories. The human civilization has sunk so low because it isn't because they did the wrong things and they need all this kumbaya crap. It's because they have moved away from their fundamental nature. And whenever you move away from nature, catastrophe is the natural consequence.
Well, it's pretty. Anybody who questions that, it's about as clear as it comes. Listen, man, it's always a highlight for me. I always appreciate your perspective, whether you like it or not. And,